our goal in this meeting is to update you on the progress so far with drawing up the ROSTEES Tour 2 project, but it's also to solicit your feedback and your suggestions. Tour 2 is a community-driven exercise. James and I look forward to coordinating this project and working with you all, but we're also very glad if we can get your feedback and your input, either by ideas for analysis, feedback on the structure of the project as it is so far, and that kind of thing. So I thought what we'd do, or what I'd hand over to James, who can present on what the Tour 2 steering committee has approved, and then at the end of that we'll turn it open to the community online today for discussion. So James, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Paul. Just fire up my slides. Okay, we can see this. Silence.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, thanks Paul for your intro, and thanks for everyone for joining. So as Paul said, he and I kind of proposed this kind of focused working group to the Tour 2 steering committee in the summer of this year, and it was approved. So what I'm going to do is kind of run through kind of our vision for kind of what Paul and I thought we kind of want to look at under the banner of ROSTEES. But obviously, as Paul says, this is a community kind of driven effort. So kind of getting input from the community, kind of collaborating with you all, and kind of researching off in different directions is key as well to what's going to appear in these slides. So just as way of by kind of general background, so ROSTEES, the role of STE in the Earth system is a focused working group of Tour 2. So that comes with kind of all the caveats that exist with Tour 2. There's no extra money. It's kind of, you know, research that we're doing and hoping to pull together from research that is kind of happening kind of organically through kind of observational and modeling communities. And it's kind of tied to the timelines of Tour 2, which is kind of this year, next year, and the year after, realistically. So Paul and I are the working group leads, but again, as we've said, kind of it's a community effort. So we're kind of relying on and looking forward to kind of working with everyone on this call and those beyond as well. It was approved in the summer, and the key aims of the working group are to kind of improve the quantification of present day STE, particularly ozone here we're focused on, its role in the tropospheric ozone budget and the impact on surface ozone mixing ratios. And that of course has knock-on impacts on how we might kind of evaluate the impacts of STE on air quality, human health and the biosphere. And then also to explore the drivers of past and future STE. So how has kind of transport of ozone from the stratosphere to the troposphere changed in the past, and how might it change in the future with the kind of combined impacts of stratospheric ozone recovery and climate change. So these are the two kind of big banner headings, but obviously we can imagine under both of these there's a lot of kind of sub-working kind of packages and interests. So hopefully what we'll see is a number of papers in both these areas, and then they'll be pulled together kind of in Tour style review papers at the end of the project. So I'm sure everyone on the call is familiar, but by way of background, the transport of ozone from the stratosphere to the troposphere is a key component of the tropospheric ozone budget. So if we think about kind of chemical ozone production in the troposphere, there's a lot of chemical production and there's a lot of chemical destruction. So the net chemical kind of tendency is around 500-ish teragrams per year. And that's very similar to the kind of magnitude that's coming from the stratosphere as well. So potentially the ozone being transported from the stratosphere to the troposphere kind of is a major component of how we might think of kind of net chemical changes in the troposphere. And that was nicely summarized in the Tour 1 papers, so Paul Young's paper and Alex Archibald's papers. And I think this figure is from Paul's paper, but kind of we know that this STE term is a major component of tropospheric ozone budgets. And we know that it's changing in time. So Paul Griffiths on the call, myself led a paper a couple of years ago now, looking at the impact of stratospheric ozone depletion in a nudged model. That is a model that had kind of specified dynamics that matched kind of observed dynamical changes. And we see that kind of when you compare simulations with and without stratospheric ozone depletion, you get kind of markedly different projections on how kind of past STE has changed. So it's an important part of the budget. It's changing through time, and we understand to some extent some of those drivers. If there's less ozone in the stratosphere, obviously the kind of potential for that ozone to move into the troposphere has been reduced. And there's also been a lot of papers kind of exploring kind of how STE might change in the future. And again, as I said at the beginning, two of the principal drivers there we might consider are stratospheric ozone recovery, so kind of increases to the amount of ozone in the stratosphere, lead potentially to the kind of higher transport of ozone into the troposphere. And then also climate change. And climate change is interesting, obviously, because it's changing kind of two parts: cooling the stratosphere, leading to more ozone, but also changing the kind of dynamical quantity of like how much ozone is being transported and where. And so key aims for ROSTEES are to kind of explore in the kind of latest generation of chemistry, climate, and Earth system models these processes. And here we've done work in the past as well, again led by Paul, kind of calculating STE in different models. And what we see is the kind of modelled STT, so here just the stratosphere, just the transport from the stratosphere to the troposphere. It's kind of broadly consistent across models in how it's changed, but the absolute magnitudes are very different. So we have here a figure which is showing kind of the tendency of ozone in 4 different system models that submitted data to CMIP6. We didn't have at that time specific diagnostics that are targeting kind of transport of ozone into the troposphere. But what we used were kind of residual calculations. So if we know how much is being chemically produced and destroyed, we can infer how much STE must be kind of responsible for closing the tropospheric ozone changes that we see in these models. And so while all the models kind of agree with a kind of tendency of around 400 teragrams per year in the pre-industrial period, we see kind of markedly different responses to the period associated with stratospheric ozone depletion, the 1960s, 70s, 80s. Across these models, so UKSM1, obviously kind of STE is decreasing significantly, and these other models not so much. And then again, we see different sensitivities to what might happen in the future. So some models showing perhaps, you know, quite large increases into the future, some models suggesting that kind of STE will kind of recover to basically where it was kind of near the pre-industrial. So what we'd like to do is kind of further explore this and kind of analyze, you know, where do these model differences come from? What are the key processes that are contributing to these differences? But also how might we best use kind of new observational data sets to kind of ground truth these models and to see actually, you know, which of these models perhaps has a more plausible kind of past trajectory of STT, and so how might we use that information to consider which models might have a better estimate of how it might change into the future. And so one of the things I think is going to really help us here is the kind of much more widespread use now of idealized tracers, specifically those that kind of diagnose stratosphere to troposphere transport. So myself and several people on this call are involved in CCMI 2022 modeling activities. And one of the really nice opportunities here is that that kind of model into comparison project has kind of mandated the use of this O3S tracer, which is a kind of an idealized tracer in the model, which is set to stratospheric ozone mixing ratios in the stratosphere, but then when it's transported into the troposphere, only experiences the chemical loss reactions that the modeled ozone field would experience. And so with this tracer now, we can actually see, we can go one step beyond. Before we had kind of residual methods, and perhaps models had diagnostic tendencies which allowed you to calculate a global STE number to get that kind of roughly 400 or 500 teragrams per year number we saw before. But now with these tracers, we can perhaps say, in these models, where is the ozone being transported across the troposphere? How kind of deep into the troposphere does it penetrate? Does it reach the surface? To what extent does it contribute to kind of surface air quality questions? So having access to these tracers, I think, is a really great opportunity for the next couple of years for us to kind of really move this research forwards. Okay, so I've kind of touched on all of these as I've been talking, but the key objectives of the working group. So the overarching objective is to identify the role of stratosphere to troposphere transport, stratosphere to troposphere exchange in the Earth system through exploitation of observational and model data sets. And so kind of key questions that Paul and I came up with while we were pitching this working package to the TOR2 steering committee were, can we improve the quantification of present day STT in observations and models? And can we use observations to better understand what, how good a job are the models themselves doing? Can we increase our understanding of the role of STT in the tropospheric ozone budget and impact on surface ozone mixing ratios? And, can we go further than that? And can we say, to what extent does ozone that kind of originates in the stratosphere contribute to air quality questions and impacts and human health and the biosphere? Can we better understand the drivers of past changes to STT and explore the sensitivity of future projections of STT to future emission scenarios? So, as I say, all kind of future scenarios are predicated on the idea that stratospheric ozone recovery is going to happen, but different SSP scenarios are making different assumptions on greenhouse gas impacts, and that will change kind of stratospheric temperatures and stratospheric circulation, and all of this together will feed back on how we might expect STT to change into the future. And a final question we have as well is, of course, so if we think about stratosphere-troposphere exchange, we're thinking about kind of fluxes across the tropopause. One of our main focuses is going to be on ozone, and for TOR, obviously, kind of better quantifying this aspect of the tropospheric ozone budget is key. But we might also want to think about, there are other species and other ways in which kind of species are transported across the tropopause, and a key one here is the monsoon circulation and how that kind of moves material from the surface and lower troposphere into the upper troposphere and lower stratosphere. So I think there's definitely a role here for kind of monsoon related research and perhaps using other species to better quantify basically how the troposphere and stratosphere talk to each other chemically. So in terms of timelines, so we've got roughly 3-ish years before the kind of next iteration of TOR review papers will be kind of solicited and expected. So put some timelines here, but kind of key one, kind of give it a key overview, is to say that this first year really is kind of bringing this community together, seeing really who wants to and who's in a position to kind of contribute and lead different aspects of the research. And then into year 2, hopefully we move into a time, and ideally this will all be kind of post-COVID as well, where we can start to think about workshops and actually meeting in person and discussing our results. So perhaps we might have early CCMI 2022 results by kind of next year. Perhaps we have new observational data sets coming online that we might want to try and exploit. And then really kind of year 2, I think, is the year where kind of everyone kind of goes out and writes their papers on STE and stratosphere-troposphere ozone exchange. And then we start to kind of formulate kind of what information will feed into these larger review papers that will be kind of in the TOR special issue. And then year 3 really is kind of bringing all that information together to write the community reports. And of course, I'll say this in this kind of bottom bullet point here, there's a lot of overlap, obviously, between what we want to do in ROSTEES with a lot of the other proposed working packages. So throughout these 3 years as well, we'll Paul and I will be kind of coordinating across the different work packages to see, what are we doing in ROSTEES that can contribute to assessments of ozone in the tropics, assessment of kind of changes to tropospheric ozone budgets and things like these, which are kind of being led by other working packages. Okay, and then my final slide, and this is particularly relevant for anyone that's joining the Tour 2 planned papers discussion in the next couple of days. Paul and I have been asked to think about what our kind of review papers might look like. So this Tour 2 community special issue, when it appears, what might ROSTEES want to contribute to that? And we've come up with these kind of 2 very broad topics. And so one is, can we look at past and future trends in stratosphere to troposphere exchange of ozone? And then the second is one much more focused on kind of surface ozone and contributions of STE to air quality, human health, and the biosphere. And so these are just the kind of, the things I've been talking about while I've been talking about these slides. But we envisage kind of 2 very large review style papers on these 2 topics, which bring together hopefully all the exciting research that's going to happen in the next 18 months or so. And with that, I will finish and hand back over to Paul.
Thanks, James. I think it's time to ask for any comments, requests for clarification, and other points for discussion that the attendees might like to raise. Either unmute yourself or raise your hand, I don't mind which. So, Irina, please.
Hi, everybody. So good morning. I was just trying to clarify. So you're trying to use the CCMI models, right? And so what is the grading of these models? How do we compare them with the, say, surface ozone stations? How well would that be working? What do you think?
James, go for it.
Yeah, perhaps I'll try this one. So that's a really interesting question, and I think the kind of evaluation of the CCMI, the new phase of CCMI models, is only just happening now. So knowing kind of how good these models are and the kind of data availability is stuff that's only kind of really currently being answered now. But I think your question touches on kind of 2 things, and one is that, are we just going to use CCMI models? And the answer is hopefully no. Hopefully we'll use those models in conjunction as well with kind of more targeted individual model studies that people will be leading kind of over the next couple of years anyway. So more kind of process-based studies focused on STE changes. But an important question that is kind of implicit in what you're saying is kind of, how do we evaluate modeled STE against observations? And I think that's a question for the community to really kind of get together and think about. I think it's a really hard question to answer. It's not something that perhaps global chemistry, climate, and Earth system models are configured to do, but our hope is to really kind of push how far we can take the models and the observational data sets and compare them. So that doesn't really answer your question, other than to say it's a really interesting question, and hopefully we will come up in the next 3 years with a way to answer it.
Yes. Yeah, because the other part of this question is we have boundary layer. And so again, the question for the modeling community, how's that boundary layer condition is used in the models, and can we perhaps compare it with observations? We have ceilometers, we have radiosondes, that's another thing to check. I know that we have a group meeting. I mean, we have meetings in Colorado with the EPA, and they are really interested in these questions. We have because they use it as the exceptional event, so they don't get penalized, right, for the day with the really high ozone amount. And we have in Colorado, springtime is the most active. And we see a lot of the variability and a lot of stratospheric intrusions. We see them with the ozone sounds, of course. With the LiDARs, even better, like you have the whole curtain of this events progressing, So, I mean, there is a lot of interesting observations. And but what we also don't see very often is that that there's an impact on the boundary layer, or maybe there is an impact, but it's mixed, right, with the local pollution, etc. So, I mean, I think it would be very interesting also to use some locations where we don't have the local pollution events happening, some place remote, and that might be interesting to use as the background kind of conditions to see those propagations. Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing is an idea of choosing or looking for sites where there's a good data record that we might use for this kind of evaluation purpose. Mm-hmm. If I've captured what you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the most optimistic way possible. We've got another question from Ashok, so I'd like to invite him to open his microphone.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Paul. Yeah, so my question is also related to CCMI models. So this new way of calculating or a better way of calculating STE, which is the O3S tracer, is that part of all these CCMI models, or it's there in some of them or not there at all? And if it is not there, then are we actually proposing that some of these models would actually include that and do the STE calculation that way? And secondly, whether if you do these calculations through the O3S tracer, would the tropopause definition be still important?
Thank you, Ashok.
So perhaps I'll try and answer again. So the O3S tracer has been requested as part of the kind of CCMI model output. Of course, there's no way to guarantee that every model will produce it, even though it's been requested. But we know that the UK ESM1 submission includes it, and we know that already some of the data that's available from CCMI, there are 2 or 3 other models that have already uploaded their O3S tracer. So there is already the opportunity to look at, what you might think of as the most bare bones multi-model study with 2 or 3 models in it. And the CCMI database kind of continues to grow all the time. So my hope is new models will kind of upload their data, and models that have already uploaded data will upload their O3S tracer. But yes, but as you kind of point out, certainly how we define the tropopause, how models define their tropopause, will strongly influence what their O3S tracer kind of looks like and how it behaves. So this is an important question. We're all prescribing, for the first time, the same way in which we treat chemically the O3S tracer. So I didn't go into the detail, but on those slides, actually, the CCMI models have been told how to calculate the loss of O3S in the troposphere. So it's only a subset of the kind of major ozone loss reactions. So we know that all the models are treating it equally, rather than the O3S tracers experiencing different kind of chemistries. But of course, if you're prescribing a tropopause that is, 2 model grid cells higher than another model, then that's going to fundamentally impact how your O3S transport is treated and where it's experiencing its chemical loss. So again, I feel I'm doing this a lot, but these aren't quite answers to your questions, other than to say they are really interesting questions, and my hope is that we will together figure out the answers to these questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, I should say that James and my contact details are on the Tortu website, so any further comments that you want to send by email be gratefully received. We do have another speaker to include in our meeting. That's Dr. Fadnavis. If you're ready, I'd like to invite you to present your slides on the other part of ROSTEES, which is to do with troposphere to stratosphere transport. So over to you, please. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, I can see that now. Yes, thank you. Sorry, so the issue here in my laptop. Okay, in the TOR 2 in ST group, I here propose a study ST over the Tibetan Plateau region. I am Suvarna Fadnavis, and there are some co-authors will be included soon in this study. So next slide, please. Here in this study, we propose two objectives: quantify the stratospheric ozone intrusion over the Tibetan Plateau region, that includes South Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia part. Through this study, we want to quantify the stratosphere to troposphere transported ozone in present day and future scenario using CCMI 2022 models and observational data if supported by the TOR. Another objective we want to propose in this study is seasonal variation of STT, means stratosphere to troposphere transport over the Tibetan Plateau region. Here more emphasis will be given to the Asian summer monsoon region. Next slide, please. Tibetan Plateau region is a quite elevated region, having a altitude of around 5 to 6 meter high in altitude, and this region is highly dynamic. Our past study shows that seasonal variation of location of subtropical jet near the Tibetan Plateau region control the transport from stratosphere to troposphere over this region. There are other processes also, but here we will quantify the transport from stratosphere to troposphere in the Tibetan region and a surrounded region. This is our another study, bottom panel, where we show where here is a distribution of PV over the Tibetan Plateau region. This figure is plotted for the summer 2014, month of June. Here we can see that this is distribution of PV, and we can see that PV is protruded down in the deep in the troposphere from the stratosphere over the Tibetan Plateau region. And our study shows that there is a day-to-day variation. These intrusions migrate eastward in the subtropical westerly jet. This right hand panel figure shows the Rossby wave breaking on the same days when there were stratospheric intrusion. Our studies has further revealed that the stratospheric intrusions are caused because of the Rossby wave breaking. Next slide, please. This is another figure from another paper where we have shown interannual variability in STT. This is published in 2010. Here black dots in the upper panel figure indicates the tropopause. This figure is plotted from MLS ozone observations, and we see there is year-to-year variability in the STT, and we can see that every year ozone is transported over the Tibetan Plateau region from stratosphere to troposphere, and our study and this data shows that strong intrusion occurs during late winter and spring season over this region, that is during January to April months. And this MLS data shows that a high amount of ozone, around 120 ppb of ozone, is transported deep into the upper troposphere over this region. Bottom panel figure is from the ERA interim ozone. It is plotted at Nainital, which is a station in Himalayas. And we can see that the ozone is transported deep around 800 hectopascal in the lower troposphere over this region. Further, we have also estimated trends over this region from multiple data set, ozone sonde, MLS, SAGE, HALO, and chemical transport model over the Indian region. This right-hand panel figure shows the trends in the upper troposphere and lower stratosphere, and over this region we see that there are positive trends in the upper troposphere and negative trends in the lower stratosphere. These positive trends in the upper troposphere are due to both because of anthropogenic activity as well as the STT. However, further quantification, its impact of the STT is not yet quantified. So this kind of study is further should be done over this region. Next slide, please. Asian summer monsoon time, there is an anticyclone in the upper troposphere. It is highly dynamic in nature, and our study shows that Rossby breaking occur in the subtropical westerly jet of the monsoon anticyclone. This figure in the top panel, left hand side, shows the monsoon anticyclone. This is a distribution of PV at 360 potential temperature. Low PV indicates the monsoon anticyclone region, and we see that monsoon anticyclone is quite broad, extended over the Asian region. Rossby breaking occur in the subtropical westerly jet. It occurs at the both edges, eastern and western edge of the monsoon anticyclone. And if you see the bottom figure in the same slide, here we show that these ozone intrusion occur from the both edges of the monsoon anticyclone over this region, and it transports quite a large amount of ozone in the lower troposphere over this region. So Asian region is already polluted, and it's emitting large amount of ozone precursors, lead to large amount of ozone production that increases the ozone, and along with that the large amount of STT over this region further increases the ozone amount. So already number of papers have shown that large number of fatalities are linked to the ozone pollution over Asia. Hence it is very important to quantify the ozone intrusion that is causing enhancement of ozone over this region. Hence we propose this study to just a focus study over the Asian region to quantify the amount of ozone coming to this region through CCMI model simulations. Thank you. I am open to take questions and further elaborate the idea.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions, please? We have a question from Renu. Oh, excuse me. I think this is a general one. Sorry, Renu. It says, why only monsoon is the focus? There are studies. Yeah.
I mean, only monsoon is not the focus. ST also occur in spring season also. Yeah. So we will see interannual variability and seasonal variability both on this region. So yes, not only, but there will be a subsection on the monsoon season.
Yeah, apologies, Renu. I'm not sure if your question was specifically directed at Dr. Fadnavis or a general comment. Any more questions, please? Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. I think we're more or less done here. Our feeling is that we'll have various meetings to keep in touch with you all as the project progresses. James, I was thinking about the next steps for this ROSTEES group. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, before we finish, I will answer Renu's question as well. But in terms of next steps for ROSTEES, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week is this tour to kind of review paper scoping exercise. And I think after that, we'll have a much clearer idea on where the overlaps on our planned review papers are with the other working groups. And so we might know, we'll have a bit more clarity on exactly what will fall into kind of our papers and what might kind of fall into other papers. But as Paul says, I think our hope certainly is to kind of grow this community, kind of bring in more people. There's a lot of people that obviously, because the time restrictions, couldn't join kind of UK lunchtime today. So hopefully as we kind of move forwards, we'll be able to have, say, in-person ROSTEES meetings associated with large kind of international atmospheric science conferences, and that'll be a fantastic opportunity for us all to actually meet each other and discuss more freely. But I think really kind of next step, so we want to start having, you know, fairly regular, if not frequent, meetings to kind of get an overview of what science is happening and how it might contribute to these review papers. But I think the next steps really are for people who are interested in leading papers to say, you know, I'm interested in leading this paper, and if they want contributions from anyone on this call or in the community to help them, then to ask, or if they're happy to go away and write their study by themselves, to do that, but to let us know that they're writing their study so we can anticipate its appearance in the review paper later. And yeah, I mean, Paul said this at the beginning, but you know, we're nominally leading this work package, but it's a community-led effort. So our job really is kind of, I see it as fairly hands-off, kind of just keeping in touch with the research which is going on, and you know, putting people together perhaps that might want to be working on similar topics. But we're definitely not the gatekeepers to stratospheric, tropospheric exchange research. If people want to lead exciting papers in that area, then they definitely should do that. So that's how I see certainly the next 18 months progressing. Is that fair, Paul?
Yeah, I think I view our role as keeping in touch with the various other TOR2 groups. There's some quite strong overlap with HEGIF-TOM and the chemical reanalysis groups, and also the ozone budget group that should be starting up. So think of us as a way of sort of disseminating what's going on in those other groups, or possibly trying to keep some clarity as to what each group is doing and what papers are coming out of TOR2 as a whole. I think that's pretty much how I viewed it. Okay, great. So I guess we'll see whoever's coming to the scoping meetings in various breakout groups. We should be running a couple of those as we go along. So it'd be great to get your thoughts about areas of research that we should be thinking about, and obviously areas of research that you want to contribute, and also whatever we can do to help you get those bits of work done, we'd be glad to help with. So unless there are any further questions from our collected audience, I'll say see you tomorrow, probably. Yep. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, all.
Thanks, David. It's good to see you. Thanks for getting up extra early.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Cool.
Bye.